Once upon a chilling London evening, Sarah, a young and ambitious journalist, found herself walking through the dimly lit streets of Soho. She worked for a local online publication and had just wrapped up an assignment. Her footsteps clicked against the cobblestone streets, filling the night air with a rhythmic sound. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every so often, she'd glimpse a shadow just at the corner of her vision, trailing behind her. When she turned, nobody was there. She laughed it off, attributing her unease to the sensational crime stories she'd been covering lately. Little did she know, someone was indeed watching her, waiting for the right moment to step out from the labyrinthine alleys of Soho. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on a tale that would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life. Sarah arrived at her office the next morning, still shrugging off the eerie feelings from the night before. She greeted her colleagues and settled into her desk, sipping a cup of hot coffee as she skimmed through her emails. Among the usual press releases and story pitches, one email caught her eye. It was from an anonymous sender, and the subject read, "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" Curiosity piqued. She clicked the email. Inside, there was a single line. "You looked lovely last night, walking alone on the streets of Soho." A chill crawled down her spine. Was this a joke? Some kind of prank by one of her colleagues? Just then, her colleague Tom leaned over. "Hey, Sarah, have you ever heard about the Soho Stalker? Some say he's a legend, but others think he really existed. Quite a mystery, actually. People say he knew his victims inside and out, knew their fears, their schedules, everything." Tom chuckled as he spoke, oblivious to the growing dread on Sarah's face. It's the anniversary of the first reported stalking case related to him. Maybe you could cover that for our dark history column. Sarah forced a smile. Yeah, that might be interesting. I'll think about it. That night, as Sarah walked back home, she couldn't ignore the shadow again lurking just within her peripheral vision. Every passerby seemed a potential suspect, every creak and rustle of the wind an omen. When she reached her flat, she double-checked all her locks and closed her curtains tight. She tried to shake off the fear, telling herself that she was just being paranoid. But as she lay in bed, her phone buzzed on her nightstand. A message flashed on the screen. "You can lock your doors, but you can't lock me out of your life." Sarah felt her heart pound against her chest as she realized that her life was about to spiral into a horrifying tale that even she couldn't write her way out of. Days turned into weeks, and the messages continued. Sometimes they were vague, just cryptic enough to make Sarah question her own sanity. Other times, they were horrifyingly specific, describing what she wore, where she had been, or what she had talked about with friends. Yet, despite her best efforts to catch the person, she never could. Surveillance cameras showed nothing, and even her attempts to trace the anonymous emails and messages were fruitless. Determined to end this nightmare, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. Armed with her journalistic prowess and a newfound desire to bring the stalker to light, she went back into the historical files of the original Soho Stalker. If she could find a pattern or a clue in the old cases, maybe she could figure out her own. That's when it happened, the inciting incident that would thrust her into the darkest corners of her own fears. Sarah was hunched over her desk, late one night at the office, eyes scanning through old newspapers and digital archives, when her office phone rang. The call was coming from an internal line. Strange, she thought. Who would be calling me this late? Tentatively, she picked up the phone. "Hello?" A distorted voice answered, sending icy tendrils of dread down her spine. "Did you miss me?" The line went dead. Suddenly, all the lights in the office flickered and went out. plunging Sarah into darkness. She reached for her phone to use its flashlight, but found it oddly unresponsive. Frozen, she listened intently. And that's when she heard a soft but deliberate set of footsteps approaching her in the dark. Sarah's heart raced as she fumbled in the dark, desperately trying to reboot her phone. Just as the footsteps seemed unbearably close, her phone flickered to life. She quickly activated the flashlight, illuminating her surroundings. To her relief, the office was empty. However, her relief was short-lived. On her desk lay a single red rose and a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, she opened it to find a handwritten message. "Are you enjoying our game?" Gripped by a sense of urgency, Sarah took immediate action. She filed a report with the police, even though they told her there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence. She also invested in a personal alarm and took to varying her routines, avoiding predictable patterns that her stalker might exploit. She decided to dig deeper into the original Soho Stalker cases, hoping that understanding the past would provide her with a clue to her current predicament. Interviews with retired detectives and victims' families revealed patterns and MOS, but nothing that led her to identify her tormentor. Sarah also confided in a couple of close friends and her sister, Emily. They began to form a tight-knit support network around her, taking turns to accompany her whenever possible. Despite these precautions, the stalking escalated. Now, even her friends and family members received messages. Anonymously delivered packages filled with sinister trinkets began to appear at their homes' lockets with photos, creepy dolls, and even more threatening notes. And then came another bone-chilling message, delivered to her work email for everyone to see. "You can involve whoever you want, but you can't escape me. See you soon." Sarah felt boxed in, like a mouse in a maze designed by an unseen but omnipresent cat toying with her before the final pounce. Just when Sarah thought things couldn't get any more harrowing, a new twist shook her to the core. She received an anonymous email containing photos taken from inside her own flat. Photos of her sleeping, photos of her working at her desk, even photos of her sister, Emily, who had stayed over a few nights for support. Shaken and violated, Sarah stayed at a friend's place that night, considering her next move. A new idea occurred to her. What if the stalker was someone from her circle of friends or acquaintances? The thought filled her with dread, but she couldn't ignore it. The stalker knew too much details that only someone close to her could know. Torn between trust and suspicion, Sarah decided to set a trap. With the help of Emily and a tech-savvy friend, she devised a way to trace any incoming anonymous emails or messages to their original source. Weeks went by with no significant incident. Sarah's nerves were frayed, but she remained vigilant, her trap set and ready to spring. She continued to probe into the history of the Soho Stalker, thinking that understanding the predator might give her a psychological edge. Then, one evening while going through old newspapers, she found a piece of information that had previously eluded her. The original Soho Stalker had a particular habit, the red rose. It was left as a mark on all the stalking cases attributed to him. Sarah's blood ran cold. The red rose on her desk wasn't just a creepy gesture, it was a signature. The implications were terrifying. Her stalker wasn't just a random psycho. He was deliberately emulating a dark figure from London's history. Just as this realization sank in, her phone buzzed. An email notification popped up. It was from the anonymous sender, but this time, the tech trap activated. Coordinates flashed on her screen, a location pinged in real time. The email had been sent from within her office building. With her heart in her mouth, Sarah grabbed her coat and personal alarm, steeling herself for what was to come. She called the police, but knew that they might not arrive in time. Guided by the real-time location data, she cautiously made her way to the office's underground archives, a place seldom visited, filled with old files and equipment. As she descended into the dimly lit room, each step weighed down by the gravity of the moment, she realized this could be a trap. Or it could be her only chance to unmask her tormentor. The archives were eerily quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the muffled sounds of the city above. She scanned the rows of dusty shelves and boxes, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. Then, she saw him, a shadowy figure, standing at the far end of the room, partially concealed behind a shelf. "So, you figured it out," the figure said, stepping into the light. It was Tom, her colleague, his face twisted into a sinister grin. "I must say, I've enjoyed our little game." Rage and fear combined within Sarah. "Why, Tom? Why do all this?" "Because it's exhilarating," he replied, almost whispering. "The power, the control, the fear, it's intoxicating." His confession was interrupted by the distant sound of sirens. The police had arrived. Realizing he was cornered, Tom lunged at Sarah, but she was prepared. Pressing the personal alarm she had in her pocket, a piercing sound erupted, disorienting him for a crucial second. It was enough for Sarah to sidestep and for the police to burst into the room, restraining Tom. Tom was arrested and taken into custody, his eyes locking with Sarah's one last time as he was led out of the archives. The room, once a place of lurking dread, became a crime scene illuminated by the flash of police cameras and the glow of forensic lights. In the days that followed, Sarah collaborated with the police, providing them with the emails, messages, and other pieces of evidence that built a damning case against Tom. It turned out that he had been obsessed with the legend of the Soho Stalker for years and had meticulously planned his actions to emulate his dark hero. News of the capture spread through the office and amongst Sarah's friends and family. Relief washed over everyone who'd been touched by this horrifying chapter. For Sarah, however, mixed with the relief was a lingering sense of betrayal and a maze of what-ifs that played out in her mind. Supportive counseling and the love of her friends and family helped Sarah cope with the aftermath. She even wrote a feature about her ordeal, blending her personal experience with an investigation into the psychology of stalking. The piece was met with critical acclaim, and readers praised her bravery. Though the immediate danger had passed, life was far from returning to normal. The experience had changed Sarah in ways she was still coming to understand. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah gradually found her new normal. Her story had led to a renewed interest in cases involving stalking, sparking debates and conversations about personal safety, the justice system, and the culture that allows such dark obsessions to fester. Though she continued to work as a journalist, she also became an advocate for victims of stalking, sharing her story and offering insights into the complex emotional and psychological impact of such experiences. As she sat down to write another piece, her phone buzzed a message from Emily. "How are you holding up?" Sarah paused, reflecting on the roller coaster of emotions and events that had defined the past year. "I'm doing better," she typed back, still healing, but better. Her ordeal had shattered her sense of security, but it had also made her stronger, more vigilant, and more empathetic to the silent struggles that others might be going through. As she returned to her writing, she found a new sense of purpose. No longer just a journalist, but a survivor and an advocate. She was committed to shining a light into the darker corners of human experience as a way to understand, to caution, and to heal. The experience remained a haunting chapter in her life, but it was a chapter that she had survived, and that had shaped her into the person she was becoming. Several years later, Sarah found herself in a conference hall, about to give a keynote speech on personal safety and the psychological trauma associated with stalking. The crowd was a mix of law enforcement officers, social workers, psychologists, and survivors. As she stepped onto the stage, her eyes met those of her sister Emily, who had been her steadfast support throughout the ordeal. A reassuring nod from Emily, and Sarah began her speech. In our lives, we'll face moments that challenge not just our courage, but our very sense of self, she started, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. For me, that moment came unexpectedly, turning my world inside out and showing me how fragile the barriers are that separate us from our deepest fears. Her speech touched on the importance of community support, the failures and necessities of the legal system, and the everlasting impact such experiences could have on victims. As she concluded, a wave of applause filled the room. For Sarah, it was a poignant reminder of her journey from a frightened victim to a survivor and an advocate. She had faced the darkest aspects of human obsession and come out the other way, not unscathed, but certainly unbowed. Walking off the stage, she felt a newfound sense of closure. Though she would never forget, she had learned to live again, fortified by the hard-won wisdom that comes from facing one's worst fears and overcoming them. It was a long road ahead, filled with both challenges and opportunities. But Sarah knew she was ready to face whatever lay on the horizon.